Well, maybe we'll just keep this shot right here, the thumbnail. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? And all you Ford guys are looking for a little information on how to get a motor out, a 4.6 of a 2010. Well, you come to the right place. This is a VIN code 8, 3-valve. Yeah, that is the engine block you see there. I didn't want to have to go to this point to taking it out, but ended up taking it out because of one little bolt, and I'll show you here in a few minutes. Wanted to do it right now so I don't have to worry about crawling under this thing 5 months from now and ice and snow and freezing cold temperatures. So I'm doing it right the first way, the first time. Now, something like that. Anyway, there's what it looks like down there. Yeah, don't worry about that rope. That rope was just kind of something I was going to try, but I didn't even use it. I actually used a chain to get the motor out. And the reason I went to all this extreme, well, right down there is where the starter bolt's onto that transmission, all because of one bolt, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But here is a look at the engine, and it was a challenge to getting this thing out. The engine hoist that I've had here, I bought this, gosh, 25 years ago at Auto Advance when they first opened up locally. It's been a lifesaver, and I rarely ever use it, but it was just enough clearance to get this out. And I think I could have lowered this down another 3 inches in the front. And I do have a small jack under the transmission to kind of keep everything nice and level when you separate this. But there's a look at the bell housing, the flywheel I should say. And you do have this plate here that goes all the way around. When I pulled this out, this one guide pin here tried to pop off, pop out, pop off, pop out, whatever you want to say. We'll say pop out. And I just tapped it back in. It's fine. This is with the starter bolts. No leaks whatsoever, but I did do a timing job on this earlier, and I put it all together, and it ran great, except when you start it up on this side and the other side where the head was, where the exhaust is, you hear this pop, 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 pop. Well, I tried to get in here and draw these stud bolts out for the exhaust. Was not successful, so I just said, you know what, I'm going to pull the head. And there they are. They are ready to go back on. All the bolts, got them out and everything by various means of welding, tapping, and drilling. And the only one I couldn't get out was, I believe, this one here. I had to put a bigger stud in it. But everything else here worked out okay. Even got the stud bolts off on the manifolds. I was all excited getting ready to put this back together until I noticed one of the bolts on the bell housing down here on the transmission that hold the starter on wasn't all the way in. So I decided to go ahead and tighten it up a little bit. Couldn't budge it. And I finally got it out and put it back in and got the thread nice and chased and everything. You know, we're all good. So I thought, I better check the top one. Well, the top one over there, well, it's a little harder to get to, and I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but right about, there's a little place cut in the block, and I really couldn't see it, so I put my socket on it. I thought, well, I'll take it out, grease it up, put it back in. Well, I barely turned on it and it snapped it right off, therefore leaving only 2 bolts in that starter instead of 3. Because on these starters, you really need all 3 bolts into this thing. This thing sits on here like this. The bottom 2 there, it had the bolts still in it. I was able to fix that, but the top one here, it snapped right off. And I'm like, no. I'm not putting this thing back together with only 2 bolts, because you know eventually this would crack and bust, and I'd have a problem right in the middle of winter. So I thought, well, what can I do? So I tried various means of trying to get a way to get that out. And I even tried to drill, tap, and you can see it right there on the top. I tried to put a nut on it, welded it. It just wouldn't budge. So all because of that bolt there, I ended up pulling this engine out. Now, another reason I pulled it out is because when I did the timing chains on it and everything, the guides, the old ones were broken. When I pulled it apart, I put my new set in. It ran great, like I said. It just had that pop, pop, pop sound exhaust noise, and I just couldn't deal with it no more. And the other reason I pulled this out was because the old guides are still down in here from the previous timing chain job. Some of the plastic guides, when I tore it apart, were missing, and they're down in here. And I thought, well, I might as well just go ahead and pull this off, pull the old pan off, and just clean it out and clean all the old debris and stuff out of it that had the timing chain guides and stuff in it. And if that wasn't enough, if you look closely right here, well, in order to get this head off on this side, I had to get this dipstick tube housing out right there. Couldn't get it out. Snapped it right off. And that was literally a half a day's work with the engine still in the vehicle, trying to figure out how to get that tube out. I eventually knocked it the rest of the way in, and of course it's also in that oil pan. So I figured, you know what, with all that, I'll pull the engine out, I'll have better access into this bolt, I can drill it out, put a good one in it, get this pan off, get all this debris, clean it out, put it back in, and go right. So that's why it's out. And on this side, you can see we're actually trying to get the welder in there. You might be able to see some of the stains and so forth. But there's 3 bolts that hold that starter on there, and I wasn't just going to drive around all winter just with 2 of them stuck in here. Even though the top one was still in, it was holding it. What are the odds the starter would go out and for somebody else or for me later? If I tried to take this bolt off, it would have snapped anyway eventually. So that's where we stand right now. This is why this thing is kind of dangling here on this engine hoist that I bought years and years ago. And I tell you, it was close. Now, I got the front end down about 6 inches. I have a small jack under the transmission, so I think when I go to put this back in later, I'm going to bring it down to 3 inches, and that should be just enough room to get it cleared. You can see just how close it is up here, and it's just kind of sitting here on this, not much weight. Now all I got to do is just pull this whole thing out, set it down on something, and go ahead and take that oil pan off, and eventually climb up in here and drill the rest of that stud bolt out, which is right over there. So other than that, the transmission's fine. It's bone dry. Engine came out fairly easy. So I don't know how well this is going to come out because the sun may be playing a little bit tricks with my camera here, but it looks like it's coming out fairly well. For me to get this engine out, there's a lot of, there's some stuff you got to unhook. I unhooked the air conditioning compressor, setting right there. There's 3 bolts, and I unhooked it from the block first. And let's see, I got this motor mount out of the way here. I unhooked both motor mounts. That's a big motor mount there. You see there's 3 bolts that go in there. And the one on the passenger side, on the driver's side, I should say, is right here. I just tuck it clear out. These are just 15 mil bolts here. Beat on that a little bit, it'll come out. And here are the 3 that go into the block. Once you get this out and get the bell housing bolts and stuff out, and the bell housing bolts, I actually did those from the top. I used a ratcheting wrench. I got up in there and just used a secondary wrench on the ratcheting wrench and broke them loose, and they came right out easy. I just don't understand why that starter bolt wasn't that easy to take out. All these came out, they're easy access, and you got 4 bolts for the transmission there, torque converter, and you get those, they'll plug access on this side over here on this transmission, which is right about there. Can you see that? Right about there. That's where we're at right now. So I'm going to pull this out of here, and I'll pull this oil pan off, and we'll get a look at and see what else in there. But then all I got to do is just clean it up, put this back together, and get in here and drill out the rest of this bolt that's on that bell housing. So all of that because of 1 bolt. But if you do it right the first time, you won't have to worry about it later in the year. So hopefully I've covered all the bases. Now the reason I pulled this transmission mount out on this side, when I was lifting the engine out, it kept kind of getting hung up on some of the stuff right here. So I just pulled it out all the way. Initially, I just unbolted these bolts right here, and I figured it would just lift right off this plate. But right here it kept getting caught. That's why I decided to go ahead and just take these 3 here out. I probably could have got away just by leaving these, taking these 3 here out and leaving these in. You can try that if you want, and you can see this is a massive, huge motor mount. So, and there's a little hook right there, which is kind of interesting. So I'm hoping I didn't, forget anything else. This is the basics. It's not a step-by-step tutorial, but at least now I can get in here and clean up a little bit, clean up all the grime and grease and all that. Everything else on the engine looks good. No leaks or anything. And there's the oil sending unit right here. I've actually got a gauge. I'm going to put a T here. I'm going to leave the original wire hooked up to the dash and everything. I'm going to put a T here. I'm going to have a digital oil pressure readout inside from this. So that's something I'm going to do. And those bolts there, I don't know if you can see that or not. These, I didn't have to take these out. I thought I had to. I'm going to rebolt this back in. That is not the thermostat. The thermostat sits up on top of the engine. So let me just give you a nice slow look here at what it looks like on the inside. I took the oil filter off, you know, and the power steering is unhooked. Transmission lines, you don't have to worry about them. And I think maybe one was bolted on the bottom of the side of the engine right here. Yeah, there was one of the lines was kind of bolted right here. So take this one little 10 mil out, you're good. And I got a Millings high pressure oil pump on here, a high volume oil pump. But it's a shame that I had to take it apart, but one thing led to another, you know. Exhaust stud, manifold bolts, then me worrying about all that plastic down in here, plugging up the oil screen. I wanted to make sure that was nice and clean. Then that bolt down there. So, all right, so we'll go ahead and pull this apart here. We'll get this down on the ground and we'll go ahead and take this oil pan off and see what's inside, and we'll take a look at it all together. Hey, let me know where you're watching from right now. All right, so we're down to our last bolt here. I'm using this to get all these 13 mil bolts out. I got one left here, and you can see the pan's pretty loose already. I hear something in there rattling around. You're gonna see it for the first time just like me. Last bolt. Let's see what we got. Oh, yeah, there's some stuff in there. All right, so there's that. And what we got? Oh, well, yep, got that piece. There's what's left of the dipstick housing we're talking about earlier, trying to get it out. There's that piece. And other than that, I see some sludge in there, but it's not really all that bad. And as for the screen, well, there's some stuff in the screen. Can you see that down in there, right there? Not sure what that is. Let me get a screwdriver. We got some plastic in there, so there you go. So I'm glad I took this off to get this stuff cleaned out. Oh, there's some pieces there. So that's why we did all that. So overall, not too bad. So now all I gotta do is go ahead and clean up everything and put this back together. And here's a better look at it. I'll set the camera over here. Like I said, just some sludge. Everything here looks pretty good. So I'm glad I took this off to clean it up and everything. I just feel so much better. And we got all of our junk pieces out and everything. And I'll sleep a lot better at night. So there we go. Alright, so as you can see, I'm literally sitting in this thing down in here. Tried to weld a nut on it. It ain't coming. So I started with a small drill bit, went with a bigger one. And now I'm up to, I think what size is this? This is a Cobalt. I'm up to a 3/16. So I'm hoping I can just simply put something in here like this. Go ahead and get it the rest of the way out. But it's what you got to do sometimes. You know, I've never had that many problems with starter bolts on a Ford. You know, and the transmission bell housing here, whatever, getting froze like this. This is kind of a rarity that doesn't happen too much to me. So let me see if I can get this out here. Alright everyone, after about 30 minutes, there's what's left. We are now putting new threads in here. I just worked the bit up until it was big enough to pretty much take all of the old bit out. Nothing left of it. Look closely, you'll see it right here. But, you can see the back here. I got it fairly straight in there. So now we'll go ahead and start our threads. I got one of the other bolts here, and I'm not sure what this is. This is a M8, I believe, bit on here. But you can pretty much, you know, if you've done this before, you know how to do it. But this was the only way I could get that stud out. It would not come out. I just find it, you know, I think aliens came in the middle of the night, took it out, and put some kind of magical glue in there so it would never come out again. That's the only thing I can think of because, you know, typically I don't have this much problem getting studs out. But all we got to do is chase this out now and finally start putting everything back together. And by the way, there's a look at that torque converter. I even painted one of my bolts there, put a little white on it in the bottom so I know where it goes back in. And we'll go ahead and wrap this video up here. We'll show you what we did here with the motor. I did get a new gasket and all that. But yeah, the only thing I can tell you is if your bolt is frozen or broken, don't attempt to try to fix it until spring or unless you have a garage, because more than likely it may snap off. Alright, success. It's pretty much right through the dead center. I used one of the bolts on the lower part to verify the threads were going to be okay. And it looks like we're going to be okay. Now all I'll do is go hunt me up another bolt. I got some threads. The starter can bolt too. This is such a relief. So it's not 100% perfect. We have thread material in there, but you know, it won't be, that bolt won't be in there as nearly as tight, and it won't freeze up again. I'll put some oil around it, some anti-seize, and it's in there pretty good. So boy, what a relief that is. I hope you don't never have to do this, guys. So all right, on to the next step. All right, some Saturday morning work, if you will. Putting it all back together, and I did get a gasket, oil pan gasket for it there, about $23. And I checked the rear main seal. You know, someone's replaced this before me. I don't know how many miles it's got on it. It's bone dry, but you know what? The right thing to do is go out and buy another one. We're going to stick that in there anyway. And there it is. It wasn't very much, $20-some. And I even got a transmission seal because you just don't know about these things. And we'll set the pump out there and we'll put that in there. And like I said, it's bone dry down there, but it's out. You might as well do it for, you know, 40 bucks. It's good insurance and all that. And also on a lot of these 4.6s, and especially the 5.4s, they can get a problem with end play. I was just checking my end play here, and yeah, everything seems to be pretty good. No hardly any end play whatsoever, which is great. You can see that there. So we're all good. And of course, we got the brand new Millings oil pump on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting all this back together. And I took the flywheel off just to verify, you know, back here that it wasn't leaking. And I was kind of torn between the two. Get it? Torn. To either replace it or just leave the old one in there. But yeah, we're just going to replace it. So everything's working out pretty good so far. And also, before I forget, I did clean the screen out, tuck it off, got all the stuff out of it. Everything's clean. The oil pan's nice and clean. And we're ready to go ahead and put all this back together and drop this baby back in that vehicle. Alright, so there is one national seal. You know, the gasket's professional trust. Okay, well, whatever. This one was only actually out to the edge of this right here, but I took the old one and shoved this in a little bit farther, and you can actually go quite a ways in with these. So I even checked on the back side here. We're good. Still got a little room to work with back there, but wanted to make sure this is in far enough, and we're good there. So that was pretty easy. I just took a screwdriver and caught the old one and kind of snaked it out. Be careful, don't scratch your crank or any of this aluminum, because it will cause a leak. All right, on to the next thing. And as you can see, my old seal came out in two pieces, so maybe this was pretty brittle. It's a good thing we are replacing it, but just so you know, these things can come out in two pieces. All right, got the new rear main seal in, flywheels back on, bolts of torque, got the seal on here and everything. And what I'm doing right here, I'm trying to put a T here so I can put in a digital gauge and also leave my regular switched wire connected, but it's a little close there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that plug on, but we'll deal with that later. But anyway, I got the transmission seal on. All right, so here we are. We got our seal in. Went in real easy. There's the old one. Like I said, it was in good shape, but it popped right out. Now this is a 6-speed transmission, so don't get the 4 and 6 confused, because the 6-speed, which is this one, takes a little tiny seal. So I like to say, out with the old and in with the better. So that's done. We're going to put our torque converter in. I'm not going to show you that. And get ready to drop this engine back in. So so far so good. I'm glad I did this, because this will just give me a good peace of mind, especially later this winter when it's cold and snowy and I can look under my vehicle and see no leaks. All right, so we get the torque converter back in. I got a little white dot down there, so I know this is down. By the way, this orange dot, I don't know, someone may have pulled this transmission out and done something to it earlier, but obviously there's a big old orange dot there, and there's some, looks like a light blue dot scratch mark there, so not sure what's going on, but that is in, and all we gotta do now is get ready to drop this engine in. All right, so there's a look at it from up here, and what's missing? Well, the engine's missing, and it's right here, and it's ready to go. And you can see my new setup there for my switch, and I'm going to put a digital readout oil pressure gauge in this vehicle also. So it's ready to go back together. The next video clip you'll see is hopefully me dropping it in with no issues. I'm going to take that motor mount off. We're going to set the motor in here, kind of set it down. It'll make it easier to get all the bolts and the torque converter stuff lined up. Once we get some bolts started, then we'll worry about these motor mounts. They're pretty easy to put in, so wish me luck. All right, folks, my masterpiece is going in. Once I get it down there, I'll spin it around and hopefully drop it in. And I went ahead and put the motor mounts in because it'll make it easier for the side of the engine to kind of rest on those. And it won't drop down too far, and it should be pretty close to that bell housing, but I just wanted to show you this here, how my setup is. And I'll tell you what, with this engine hoist, there's just enough room here to get that in there. If that bumper was any farther out, I'd probably have a problem, but you can see I even painted the flex plates, so. All right, let's go ahead and get her in there. And boom, just like that, she's in. Took me a little while to get that thing in. Once I got it down in there, balancing wasn't too big of a deal, and I got all of my bolts there started. The thing you got to really do is when you paint your two bolts, well, your bolt and your torque converter bolt, there's a hole over here. My advice is go ahead and spin that plate around the flywheel and the torque converter. Spin the torque converter before you drop the engine in. And that way you can kind of see that over here, because you really can't see it under the engine. And if I zoom in, I think you can almost see the bolt there sticking right in the center of the screen. That is the torque converter bolt with paint around it. That big hole there is designed for you to get in there and do things with that torque converter. So that's my tip there. Other than that, it's in. That motor mount is in. This one I had to take back out because the engine did not want to kind of settle in there. It kind of hung up, but that one there is right there. We'll stick that back in here a little bit later. All I gotta do is put my 4 torque converter bolts in, start putting heads on, timing, and all that. So I guess we'll end the video here. I'll put a link at the end of this video once we do our first start, once it's all back together and all that. So it's in. My advice, you need 2 people. This was a one-man job for me, and I'll tell you what, I don't think I want to do this again by myself. I've done a lot of engines, but maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. But this one kind of beat me, but it's in. So there you go, guys. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and all that. Say hello, and until my next video,